Okay guys, we need to talk about Football Manager's match engine.
So impressive. Tearing defenses apart. Could this be the moment?
As you probably already know, Sports Interactive came out with version 26.3 of FM26 really recently. Or maybe it's called 26.2, well whatever. Anyway, the utter lack of match engine updates has quite a few people in the community feeling really upset. And as usual, we have self-proclaimed experts coming forward to talk about how they can see the problems in the match engine and how upset they are about it. Okay, I'm going to put this to you guys as bluntly as I possibly can. You know how I am. If you're playing Football Manager normally, game by game, the way that most of us play it, you don't know anything about the underlying match engine. You just don't. And the game that you see, regardless of whether you're playing in 3D mode or 2D mode, or you're playing like 2D Classic from FM17 or something like that, that game that you see is actually not the match engine. Now, to show you how the match engine works, I'm going to use the words of one of the guys who originally programmed the game. Way back in 2009, back when people were a little bit happier, a user asked a simple question: is FM a live sim or not? The poster noted that he had read where somebody had said that the match is played through electronically right off the bat, or right as soon as you click into the match. Now, since those were friendlier times, he got a reply from a gentleman named Ov Collier. Ov would be Oliver, one of the two Collier brothers who formed Sports Interactive back in the early 1990s. In other words, this response here is literally a response from one of the guys who originally designed this game decades ago. If anybody were to know how this works, it would be him. And if you don't believe me, you can always check out his Wikipedia page. Anyway, Ov tells us that the game will generate a complete game result for you as soon as the match starts by generating what he calls weighted random numbers. Now, Ov, I love your explanation, but I want to go a little bit deeper here so we can understand exactly what's going on. When we're talking about weighted random numbers, we're talking about giving certain random number values a greater chance of being chosen than others. So you can think of it like this. So pretend that there are three kinds of food you want to eat: apples, carrots, bananas. Let's say you prefer apples and you would like to eat them 7 out of 11 times. You only want bananas 3 out of 11 times and carrots only 1 out of 11 times. The weighted random concept is here. It means that those variables are given different amount of weight when it comes to determining the final result. In your case, you're probably going to eat an apple. Now, this is an important concept to keep in mind, by the way. It's why I went on this tangent. We wouldn't want Football Manager to be entirely random and take absolutely nothing into consideration. The attributes that exist in the game are examples of weights, and those attributes are also individually weighted differently. The match engine randomly determines the result of a match while taking into consideration those weighted variables. Now, basically, the match engine generates a series of weighted random numbers that tells the game exactly what will happen in your match, and this happens instantly when you load the match. Afterwards, the game goes back through the random numbers and repeats the sequence, but this time it stops the match in the right places to show you the highlights. So you might feel excited after watching your team piece together a really nice looking goal like this. However, that goal and the rest of the match was only part of a sequence that was determined way back in this stage. And the thing is that it has to be like this. If it were not like this, Football Manager would not know which highlights to show you. You'd have to sit back and watch the full 90 minutes every single time and it would drive you nuts. However, this does not necessarily mean that the game is scripted. Ov goes on to very kindly explain that things like substitutions and tactical changes will cause the random numbers to be recalculated from that moment moving forward. And so if you're late in the match and the computer control team is starting to come back, it might be in response to a change of some sort that the computer manager made. Or it could just be part of the initial random number sequence. It's actually kind of hard to tell. Now, there are a few things I need to make clear after this basic explanation. First of all, I need to explain to you why Football Manager is set up this way. The truth is that this is one of the most efficient ways to create this kind of game. The thing is that Football Manager needs to have the ability to play tens of thousands of matches efficiently and to store them in a way that you can easily access them. After all, you want to see why your under-19s team lost their most recent match, right? The information is stored as part of your save file, and as you can see here, save files tend to be a few hundred megabytes in size. Now, if this were a different system, so like just say, for example, Football Manager was generating all of these results in real time and on the fly, it would be much more difficult for this game to save this data efficiently. Because the game is using a series of weighted random numbers, the game can simply store those numbers, and it takes up like no space at all because it's a computer, right? When you want to go back and watch your match again, it will show you everything in the right order, and it will be the right thing that the game originally generated. Now this brings me to the concept of detail. So if I want, I can choose a random match from my league and see exactly what happened. When the game is loading information, it's actually loading those random numbers in order. It will show me only the goals if that's what I want to see, or I could watch the entire 90 minutes if I really wanted to.
He's found a way past and shoots. Oh, it's a beauty.
Again, the only thing that is stored in the save file is that list of random numbers when it comes to these old matches. This is, again, the most efficient way to do it because otherwise you would be talking about absolutely huge files for every single one of these matches. So for example, when I use OBS to record Football Manager matches for use in later videos when I'm playing it, I'm talking like dozens of gigabytes per match, right? Sports Interactive's method is much better. Anyway, this is where detail comes into play. If the detail settings are turned off, it just means that you can't rewatch the match since the random numbers are not saved. I can read the result of a match like this, sure, but I cannot watch it because the detail level is set to off. There is a ton of misinformation out there about this detail level. Some of this comes from some of the most prominent members of our community. I won't say who, but you can figure it out. Once again, I'm going to be really blunt with you. The truth is that detail level has nothing to do with how the match engine itself operates. It has everything to do with whether the game is saving those random numbers that it generated for your later use. In other words, do not buy into this argument that turning detail to full for every conceivable league will somehow make your game more realistic or come up with better players or something like that. It's not true. All you're doing is filling up your hard drive for no reason. This post, which comes from a moderator at the official forums, claims that there is a quick match engine and a full match engine. This is entirely false. The truth, which Sports Interactive has said many times in many places in the past, is that detail level only impacts whether the match can be rewatched or not. It is absolutely false and very misleading to say that having a high detail level somehow impacts the match engine. It does not. The correct answer is in this post from 2011. Detail level only impacts whether you can go back and rewatch the match, or in other words, whether those random numbers are saved. There was once a time when people generally understood that the detail level did not impact match results, but sadly, misinformation by some prominent members of the community has muddied the water. Alright, now I can't stress this point enough. There is only one match engine in Football Manager. There are not two engines. There's not a different engine for when you go on holiday. There's not a different engine for when you decide to use the instant result button. It all plays out in the exact same match engine. There is one match engine. There is no quick match engine. There's nothing like that. It doesn't exist. These posts are 100% nonsense, and it's appalling to see this come from a moderator on the official forums and to not see like somebody from SI go in and fix him. Let me say this again. Choosing instant results to play out a match does not involve some secret or smaller match engine. So if you're a jerk like me and you decide to instant result your way through a season, it will not make your team better or worse. The results you get come from exactly the same match engine as if you played out the match yourself. And since the match level for your own team is always set to high, you can also go back and watch the goals and highlights of your own match after the fact. The game will show you as much or as little of that match as you want to see, and it will always show you the same match with the same results since it is using the same string of random numbers that it saved. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a secret, right? This is the secret of the Football Manager YouTubers. Chances are that your favorite Football Manager YouTuber uses this method very frequently. The reason why is because it's efficient. So the YouTuber wants to make a long and in-depth video that's like 40-45 minutes long that goes through an entire career to tell a full story, and the YouTuber needs it in like 3 days, right? So the most efficient way to do this is to simply autoplay through several seasons, like save the game maybe once every season or so, see what storyline it is that you come up with, and piece it back together after the fact. Now that feels really cheap, right? It feels like you're not really playing Football Manager, right? But I mean, it is still Football Manager. It's the same game, it's the same engine, and it works the same way. Now, all of this is important to know if you want to understand the studies on sites like FM Arena. Fortunately, the forum members over there understand that Holiday Mode and Instant Result do not use a different match engine, which means that they are better informed than that moderator on the official forums. The other thing that the FM Arena staff has constantly discovered in its testing is that Football Manager's match engine is extremely random. It's random to the point where the same tactic might get you promoted or relegated against the same opposition, holding everything else equal. And so, when you look at FM Arena's list of the best tactics, you will see that they are tested against extremely high sample sizes. We're talking thousands upon thousands of matches with all other variables held constant. Now, the other thing I want to address here is this bizarre notion that Football Manager is somehow scripted. Now, it's scripted in the sense that the random numbers are generated before you do anything in the match. That is true. But the game does not determine whether you will win or lose an individual match before you go in to start to play it. If it did, save scumming would not work, and yet save scumming does work. It's actually really easy and very efficient if you have no morals or whatever. And the game does not generate results based on reputation either. There was a guy who tried to prove this wrong back in the official Football Manager forums on Christmas Eve in 2007. He swapped a bunch of players between Chelsea and Millwall, noting that the Chelsea players didn't help Millwall much, and concluded that the match engine was based on reputation alone. Anyway, none other than Miles Jacobson came out on Christmas Day to prove this random guy wrong. Okay, I know I rag on Miles all the time, and he really is a problematic person to have as your boss. But seriously, Miles, there was no need to destroy your Christmas to answer some random guy's ridiculous problem. I mean, that should have been obvious. Anyway, the gaffer kept us updated as his season went along. Now, I guess it's fortunate that Miles confirmed that he was a workaholic and that this was totally unnecessary, though I really think it says a lot about his ridiculous priorities and his insane narcissism. In the end, Chelsea was relegated and Millwall was promoted, and the original poster was proven wrong. The game engine does actually work, and it's not based on reputation alone. Now, again, that was kind of an extreme example, and like I said, it's also a pretty good example of why you don't want someone like Miles Jacobson to manage your company. But this helps show that this game is actually not scripted. In other words, the game does not have a vendetta against you or against your team. It all uses the same algorithms that make up the match engine. This is an engine, by the way, that we can study in large part because it is consistent, and I'll show you next how to interpret the results of those studies. The baseline that FM Arena uses in its studies is this, about 52 points out of 114 possible points in its custom league. This custom league, by the way, is set up to hold almost all variables constant, including keeping players at the highest level of conditioning and morale, stopping them from being transferred, stopping injuries from happening, and so on. And so if you're looking at a tactic that gets 63.6 points on average after 9,600 automatically played matches, there's a good chance that this tactic makes a really big difference. That just so happens to be the FM24 tactic with the best possible results. In other words, you're getting maybe like 11 more points or so in any given season based solely on the fact that you're using that tactic. The tactic kind of makes a difference in FM24, but not as big of a difference as you might think. In comparison, the best FM26 strikerless tactics still get over 84 points on average, and that's true even after the most recent update. For whatever reason, the FM26 version of the match engine seems to favor strikerless tactics to an extreme extent. And the interesting thing is that this will likely remain true until the end of FM26. At least I don't see Sports Interactive making any big changes to the underlying match engine. Now, I know what you guys are all thinking, and you guys have been saying this to me over and over again, right? Just don't use a strikerless tactic. Treat it as an exploit and forget about it, forget that it ever existed. But the thing is, you guys are missing the point. The reason this is a problem is because Sports Interactive is clearly completely ignoring fundamental flaws within FM26. The company is so fixated on making these useless and minor changes to the user interface that don't even fix the broken user interface. And then it ignores the big problems with the match engine, which are very well known and which everybody's talking about. In my opinion, that is not a good sign for the future of this company. Regardless, you need to remember that player attributes are always more important than tactics. In this brief study from 2024, FM Arena looked at two tactics that picked up around 60 points on average. When the team kept the tactics the same but improved the attributes of the players, these otherwise sort of ho-hum tactics resulted in a lot of victories. But if you really nerfed the team, what a lot of people think of as using like a lower league side, the tactics performed really, really poorly. So long story short, the quality of your players is far more important than the quality of your tactics. And that's why you don't want to make really stupid decisions like I've made. So in one of my recent saves, I decided to sell all of my good players, and it wound up going really, really poorly. It can be really tempting to get into a new save and just sell all of your players, figuring that you'll make better youth players. Now, we had a little bit of success when I did this, and we also had a youth intake that looked phenomenal, which made me believe that, hey, this plan actually works. However, the kids just were not good enough yet to play at this level, and we started losing tons and tons of matches. In the end, my transfers did so much damage to the club that even my young new gens wanted to get out, and that meant that the save was basically ruined. So I'll repeat that again just in case you didn't get the message. In Football Manager, the quality of your players, as in the attributes of your players, that is far more important than the quality of your tactic. People spend way too much time overanalyzing this game, looking deep at tactics, looking deep at the data. The truth is that the only data that really matters in this game in the long run are the attributes of your players. The attributes that matter the most are pace and acceleration. This has been proven over and over again, year in and year out. Now, there's one more thing that I want to touch on regarding the match engine, and that would be the match engine tweaks that exist. So, as most of you guys already know, there are mods out there for FM24 that provide a different experience. I'm only going to focus on the physics file and what it seems to do. The file this refers to is this physicalconstraints.jsb file, which is part of the simatch.fmf file that is part of FM24. Now, you need to understand that this file itself is not the match engine. Instead, this is a file that helps the match engine determine the maximum physical limits of players as it figures out what to do with the string of random numbers that it generated. So that's really all that these mods do. They don't actually change the algorithms that make up the match engine, since none of us have access to those algorithms. Anyway, there was a big post over on Reddit that went viral about half a year ago pointing out where the head of Sports Interactive's match engine team took pot shots at the FM Match Lab crew. The head of the team noted, correctly, that the FM Match Lab edits only impacted that physical constraints file, but he implied that they had no actual impact on how the match engine works. Now, that's actually not entirely true. It's misleading. It does have an impact, and you can see it for yourself. In fact, here's an experiment you can do. So play through part of a save using the default simatch.fmf file. Save your game, and then change that file out for the tweak version of simatch.fmf. Then go back and watch some of your old matches. When you go back to rewatch them, you'll notice that the match will play out completely differently, and sometimes the match that you see will give you a different result than the result that was saved. And you can try it out for yourself. Anyway, despite the fact that it changes no match engine code, as this poster pointed out here, it's important to note that the FM Match Lab files do have a significant impact on how the game is played. There's also this point about how the match engine changed for FM26, which really is not the point that this guy should have brought up. As I just showed you, the FM26 match engine is indeed different. It's far easier to exploit than ever before. Just don't play with any strikers. And so this self-congratulatory bit at the end about how amazing it is to have in and out of possession tactics is really just a load of junk. It turns out that none of the tactics that break the match engine have any significant different formations in or out of possession, aside from pushing some players slightly further back on defense. But the part that really pisses me off about this particular staff member and his smug response is that he really should feel ashamed. FM26 is not an improvement on FM24 in any sense of the word. I'm going to repeat that. FM26 is actually a major step backwards from FM24. Not only is the user interface total garbage, it's an absolute mess of AI vibe coding, but the match engine itself is complete and utter garbage. Honestly, you should stop playing FM26 and you should go back to FM24, assuming that you can. If you can, you will be amazed just how much more engaging and fun the older game really is. Anyway, there's a bit of insight into what the match engine actually is and how it actually works. This can be confusing since the graphical part is the part that players actually see and interact with. When you're talking about the match engine though, please keep in mind that the match engine itself is different than the graphics engine. And for goodness sake, guys, in the comments, stop telling me that there's a different match engine when you do an instant results or go on holiday or whatever, because you are wrong. In fact, not only is that not true, but people proved this wrong like 20 years ago. Before you paint yourself up as an expert on the match engine, like do at least some research.